Have you ever seen something from the corner of your eye that wasn't there when you looked again? How about hearing from a friend of a friend that while they were hiking in the mountains, they saw something that was just impossible, but when they spoke to a ranger or someone else in authority, they left them with a simple explanation that just doesn't quite fit. Well, my name is Jack, and this is my colleague Chris, and we're senior wardens for the Creature Conservation Initiative. We protect the world from creatures of superstition and myth, but more importantly, we protect those same creatures from the world. So, here we are, episode 3. And so far, we've got a little bit of interest. I'm feeling quite good about this. People want to know about the world.
Yeah.
What do you think, Chris?
I love it. It's, as I said before, I'm excited to talk about these things, and I love that people want to hear about them, so it seems like we have a thing going on there.
Yeah. And you listening, we love the fact that you are hungry for answers to these questions of what actually is out there and what the hell was that thing you just saw in the corner of your room. Oh my god, run away, run away.
Leave the podcast running, though, so we get the listens while you're running.
Sounds good. And do you think if we like message some people and email some people, they would class it as 2 listens through one download?
Maybe.
Yes, we are here today and we're talking about another one of those interesting little creatures called the Kelpie. Now, Chris, do you know much about the Kelpie?
I know next to nothing about the Kelpie.
Never encountered one?
No, I know that they live around Scotland, if I'm not mistaken, and I know that, or at least I think it's another watery horse situation like we had the other time. But other than that, that's pretty much the extent of my knowledge.
Oh, you're not wrong. There is a little bit of that watery horse kind of thing going on, but there can also be a watery anything.
Oh.
They are shapeshifters.
Oh, great. I hate shapeshifters.
Yep, so do I. They are very, very frustrating to deal with. Mostly because they can be absolutely anything.
Exactly. Unbelievably frustrating.
Yeah, well, luckily for us, what we tend to find is that with shapeshifters, they tend to have a preferred shape.
Yeah.
You know, they tend to kind of find something that they like to be.
Yeah.
And they stick with it, which then makes it a little bit easier for us to identify and find them. But yes, we will get straight into this and start talking straight about Kelpies. They are very, very popular creatures in fiction and myth, and you'll tend to find them in pretty much anything, you know, like that medieval fantasy type of lore and fiction and movies and games. They tend to inhabit that quite a lot. But they are far more ubiquitous than even there, to the point where they found their way into recent games, like I said. I remember seeing one in the most recent God of War game that came out.
Yes, I remember.
Yeah, they were used as a method to travel to the Fates. Yeah. But they are also so popular that in Falkirk, I believe in 2013, I may be wrong, but they finished building the twin steel sculpture statues of the Kelpies.
Oh, where was that?
In Falkirk in Scotland.
Okay, makes sense. It's weird how all these creatures tend to have statues, and yet somehow people just forget they exist.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where you just don't really think about them existing. They're always very, very interesting creatures of myth and legend. And they are very much creatures that are seen in Scottish and Irish folklore. But they also apparently have counterparts in various different places around the world. Like in other parts of Scotland, they are likened towards the Nuggle.
The what?
Or the Tangi of Orkney. Again, shape-shifting creatures. But they're not just all around the British Isles. They have parallels in the Germanic Neck.
Yeah.
Or the Scandinavian Bakkahast, which I am pretty certain I have completely butchered that.
I am pretty certain as well.
Well, like I say, they appear to actually be quite European.
Yeah.
And pop up all over the place. But not just there. They're in Central America as the Wehwin and Australia as the bunyip.
Yeah. It's rare that a creature is really international in that way. Most of them are somehow more or less localized to at least a landmass, at least in my experience.
Well, you're not wrong there. They are all over, but at the same time, those aren't Kelpies.
Oh.
They're their own little thing. And this is the inherent problem when we're having to deal with any kind of shapeshifter.
Yeah.
They can just be anything.
It's very annoying.
Again, it's one of those things where you'll have to have dealt with a shapeshifter at some point in your career.
Sure.
Within the CCI. Yeah. They're just all over the place, and they are so difficult to contain. They're so difficult to hunt. You know, you're just trying to find the damn things half the time. And I've heard, luckily it's not happened to me because it's quite embarrassing, but it's not been unheard of that, say, an investigator has walked around and literally been followed by the creature they were trying to catch.
Look, I don't appreciate this personal attack. You didn't have to call me out like this on the podcast, but yeah, that has been reported to happen to some people.
And, you know, we're all a little bit nervous when we start with the investigations groups.
Yeah, that's why I hate shapeshifters. They are just trouble all the way around. Even for the science department. I mean, how do you classify biologically a shapeshifter? You say they have a preferred form, but is that really their biology? But can you even classify them at all? It's just trouble all around.
That is part of the problem and why we have the classification of shapeshifter, but as you've kind of alluded to there, a lot of us don't really like that classification because there are different types of shapeshifters, but you know, how do you force them to their natural state? And what is that natural state in the first place?
Exactly.
Very, very annoying to deal with. But anyway, back to the Kelpie. They tend to be known as kind of watery horses because they really, really like the shape of a horse, and they tend to hang around lakes, lochs, and rivers. Their kind of MO, shall we say, is that they like to kind of catch weary travelers, people who might be out for a walk alone, and they tend to appear to them as these absolutely massive, beautiful, big horses, stallions, geldings, mares, whatever they feel like, whatever they think is going to attract their prey, because unfortunately they do see us as prey.
If there's one thing you'd take away from this podcast as a whole, it's that this kind of thing happens across all the world and across all kinds of different creatures. If you're out and about alone and you see something beautiful, it's safer not to approach it, because chances are it's something to trying to lure you in and eat your body parts.
Very much so, and the main thing to be really, really wary of walking alone, essentially, especially depending on where you are. And one day we'll talk about some of the beasts that inhabit parts of America, and those are scary. I personally never enjoyed my deployment to some of the national parks over in America. I don't know if you did, but there are some nasty creatures there.
Yeah, it's always it's a double-edged sword. It's very beautiful. It's fun to be around there until it's not, because there's all kinds of creatures that may or may not have it out for you. And of course, we are a bit better prepared than the ordinary person going on a hike there, but still, you can never really let your guard down if you know what might be out there.
But anyway, back with the Kelpie. Yes, they like to try and draw people in. Now, the really, really interesting thing about the Kelpie is actually how they catch people, because like I say, they draw you in. They get you to want to come to them and to see them, this big, beautiful, majestic horse-like creature, especially if you're, say, a lost traveler who's finding it difficult to, navigate where you're where you are, and then all of a sudden this massive, well looked after and well maintained looking horse, and it is well known that horses do return home quite easily. It might, in your mind, you might sit there and think this is the lifeline. Well, what actually happens is they encourage people to kind of come over and touch them, and maybe even mount them and get on their back ready to ride away. At which point, it turns out they have incredibly adhesive skin. They stick to you, they hold you and lock you tight. And then they will ride off into the waterway to drown their victim and finish off by eating their victim. But weirdly enough, they don't really like your digestive system, so they'll throw your entrails back out onto the riverbank, which is where you tend to find that person who went missing yesterday.
Once you're stuck to that thing, you're basically done for as far as I understand it.
Yeah, if you are not prepared, you are done for.
And that's a danger of the thing, isn't it? Because if something charges you, at least you know that it's dangerous. Whether you can do anything about it or not is the other thing, but at least you know that you can run away or fight or whatever. But if you think it's safe and you go towards it, then you only realize there is any danger at all when it's too late.
Exactly. And the thing is with the Kelpie is they're also very, very intelligent in they have been known to extend the length of their back so more riders can hop on. But all that is more dinner. They're just finding ways to have seconds.
When it extends, does it get more legs, or is it just stretching out like a sausage dog?
As far as I'm aware, they stretch out like a sausage dog. I personally haven't seen them do it, but that's mostly because I've only ever really encountered them one-on-one as part of my job as an investigator, essentially.
Yeah.
There is a bit of an annoying point, though, with Kelpies, I tend to find. Kelpies were kind of well-known and popular prior to Christianity kind of arriving on the shores of England.
Yeah.
And on the shores of Great Britain, basically. So when Christianity started creeping into the country, there were a few misnomers put out there about them. Notably, the fact that apparently they keep their hooves when they turn into humans, because again, they do occasionally mimic humans. There are stories of them mimicking people to try and entice you back to their lairs and back to the water's edge. Apparently they kept their hooves while they were human, in their human form. This doesn't make any sense.
Seems like a giveaway.
Exactly. As well as apparently when they're in their equine form, their hooves are backwards.
Why would that be?
There's a lot of talk about it, and it's because these do prey on people and they do eat you, and they are considered evil from this standpoint. We don't consider lions evil, but we'll talk about that another day. They are very dangerous creatures. So they were, in the way of Christianity, they were seen as connected to Satan and the devil.
Sure, it's on most of these things. They really made it evil for themselves.
Well, don't get me wrong. If you're going to give out warnings against, these creatures eating you or anything dangerous, that is fine. Tell people what they need to. But what this will have done was made people actually encounter Kelpies, go, that's a human without hooves, or the hooves on that horse are the correct direction. This is perfectly fine. And then they get eaten.
Great.
It's just misinformation.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things we're trying to get away from by revealing all this information to you about these creatures you don't know. But it's one of those really, really frustrating parts where they just want to show evil, and it was just unnecessary, and I can't even think how many people might have died as a result.
Must have been loads. Christianity is causing problems as always.
Yeah, well, that is that. Yeah, there are other myths, a little bit more innocent, that kind of hide behind them.
Okay.
There's the idea that in some parts of Scotland, they have been reported as having a mane of serpents.
I've Serpents.
Yeah, snakes, serpents, whatever you want to call them.
Like a Medusa around their neck, or...
Essentially, yes. And whereas I'm not going to turn around and say, no, they can't, they are shapeshifters.
It's true. But maybe it was a fashion thing. I mean, they are intelligent, maybe.
Well, we do know of orcas that like to wear salmons on their heads, so...
Exactly.
It's not impossible. But, again, this is one of those things where if they are trying to entice people to come and, see them, sit on them and all that, they're not exactly going to get that many people coming towards them if they've suddenly got a mane of poisonous snakes.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Usually would keep me back at the very least.
I mean, it depends on the snakes, doesn't it? If I was sure it was not venomous snakes, I'm not gonna lie, I might approach this, because the mental image I have is pretty cute, actually.
Yeah, maybe a couple of corn snakes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's that. They are also apparently able to sing.
To sing?
Yeah, apparently some of them are able to sing, which has obviously enticed people over with their singing voice.
Sure.
I'm not that sure on how often the long face of a horse is going to entice that many people to come over, and whether the reverberation. I'm not that sure how often the reverberation that you can get from the long face of a horse is going to make for a lovely singing voice. I don't think Beyonce is going to be running out of fans anytime soon.
Who knows? Did you ever hear one sing?
If I'm perfectly honest, I think I may have at some point during one of my investigations, but I never saw one singing.
Okay.
So it's not something I put too much stock into, but it's always entirely possible. And they also apparently can be tamed, can be captured and forced into work.
That's interesting.
Oh yeah, there's a story of the Laird of Morphy, the Laird obviously being kind of a massive landover. But there's the Laird of Morphy, who managed to capture a Kelpie, harness it, and put it to work building their castle by hauling stones, because they are obviously very, very powerful creatures. There are other stories around of like farmers who have managed to trick a Kelpie into work, and it makes massive differences to their farms. The thing is, the Laird of Morphy story, if we go back to that, apparently when the Kelpie was actually released, it then laid a curse on the Morphys.
Okay.
And as a result, the entire family died out.
Is there anything to that? Because that sounds a bit far-fetched.
Not that I've been able to find, or at least not in the sense of there was a Kelpie involved. I get the feeling that was more of a story. But the one thing I can say about it is they are very, very powerful creatures. They do take a lot of physical prowess to control and to force them to even just follow you. Or at least that's if you're trying to overpower them. And again, you've got to be careful because they have the ability to change shape. They have the ability to basically adhere you to their skin. So, you have to be very, very careful in handling them. So you might wonder how people were able to capture them in the past.
I mean, you'd probably want to lure them with food like you do with other carnivores. I don't think there's much of physical overpowering involved there.
Well, apparently what it is that in the past, if you could get a harness that had the stamp of the cross on them, you could control them. Again, religion trying to poke their way in.
Sure.
But what it actually is, and this is the truth behind it and how we kind of handle them, is that they actually have a weakness to silver and iron.
Oh.
It's been reported that if you have to or you want to kill a Kelpie, for whatever reason, sometimes they might have been plaguing the land, then using a silver bullet kills the Kelpie. Or there's a story of a blacksmith who slayed one by essentially sticking 2 iron spikes into it.
Okay.
And what actually happens to them is that you do see their real form, which is basically like a jellyfish gelatinous mess.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they just kind of melt into this big gelatinous puddle in front of you.
I did not know that.
it's not something that we see very often because, again, we actually managed to contain these creatures quite easily because, again, we looked at these stories, and when we started trying to handle Kelpies, and obviously we didn't want to kill them, what we did was we got harnesses together. We didn't stamp them with the cross. We just inlaid silver and iron into them.
Yeah.
You get a lasso with silver kind of braid into the rope itself,
Mm-hmm.
and you can immediately kind of nullify and weaken them.
Interesting. It's a running theme, isn't it, that of silver being a weakness of these, of many creatures.
Yeah, silver and iron. We're not sure why. It's the major question that I know the research groups are always asking, but they just can't seem to find the answer. We don't know if it's bacterial, virology. We don't understand why. But luckily, it just means that we do have some simple and easy ways to handle these creatures.
Exactly. What I'm also interested in is the 2 iron prong thing, because honestly, even if it was not sensible to iron, it seems that if you stick 2 rods into a creature, that might kill it anyway.
Yeah, I'll give you that. There's always a bit of a chance that the iron isn't really necessary, but...
At least in that story, I'm not sure how much it did.
Exactly. We do find that iron tends to help us kind of managing these creatures, but you're not wrong in the sense of you stick a couple of iron prongs into something, it's not going to have a good day.
Exactly.
These are dangerous animals. We have to be very, very careful about how we handle them. But look, as I say, we've got these different ways in which to control them, corral them. But there aren't that many of these Kelpies left. They were actually quite aggressively hunted before the CCI was formed, essentially. And the ones that are out there now tend to be hiding. But what we do with them now is we tend to find them, we contain them, we catch them. Luckily, we don't need to usually use a containment team. We tend to, an investigator who understands what they're hunting, they tend to be enough.
That's good.
But it was a little bit like the one I encountered many, many years ago. I was probably a few years into being an investigator, and they sent me off to go investigate, weirdly enough, a few sightings. There'd been some disappearances in the area, and we were pretty sure what we were dealing with based on some of the findings. When I was there, what we actually did was we managed to persuade the Environment Agency in the UK to kind of block off this area. We just gave them a load of rubbish about some kind of virus that we thought, some kind of dangerous algae. I don't know. I leave that stuff to kind of the PR team.
Yeah.
But yeah, we managed to persuade them to close off the little region that we were in. And what I did was I made myself look like I was a lost traveler.
Okay, how did that look? That sounds interesting. What do you do to cosplay as a lost traveler?
Well, dirty clothes, change into some, dirty and ripped jeans, walk around. I hadn't shaved for a few days, made it look like I was, a bit ragged and all that.
Yeah.
And just hid my equipment as best as I could underneath my clothing. Brought a ripped bag that held some of the stuff I couldn't hide.
Yeah.
Like my firearm, because sometimes we have to be ready to protect ourselves in some ways.
Of course.
But I managed to keep my rope with the silver kind of braided into it. That I kept that out the way, kept that hidden under my shirt behind my back. And in my bag was essentially a harness to take control of these creatures, because like I say, once you harness them, especially with the silver, they become docile and easy to handle. It's like the energy gets sapped away from them.
Yeah. So they are intelligent enough that you need to hide these things. So if they see it, they know what's going on.
Yes. Well, again, this appears to be kind of their weakness. So they get the idea, keep away.
Yeah, makes sense.
We don't know if it's instinctual or if it's actually, they see it, they process it, and they recognize it. But either way, we have to keep it well hidden.
Yeah.
And like I say, I just kind of hid myself quite in the open, walking around, looking a little bit like I was lost, trying to stumble around, looking for tracks, looking for clues the entire time, trying to make it, trying to kind of overplay this. Because the thing with a lot of these creatures is that they are intelligent, they are kind of progressive, and they adapt, but they still don't understand modern equipment. So they tend to fall prey to that weakness.
Oh, lucky for us.
Very lucky for us, because trust me, when I actually did manage to find this Kelpie, it did appear to me as a big, beautiful, like, white horse. Luckily, I'm quite an adept horseman myself in my normal life, and I know that there's no such thing as a white horse.
There isn't.
So I was pretty certain what I was looking at to begin with.
That's almost more interesting than the creature.
Oh no, they're technically classed as grey. If you look at what people see as a white horse in real life, there's actually flecks of grey throughout their entire body.
That's wild. My mind is blown.
But it did mean that when I saw this big, beautiful white horse in front of me, I knew exactly what we were dealing with.
Okay, so what do you do? It seems like harnessing it isn't an easy task.
No, well, what I did was I started to approach it very, very carefully. Again, acting as best as I could, as if this was the best thing that was ever happening to me. I was a tired, weary traveller, blah-de-blah-de-blah, you know, all that rubbish. Just got close enough that if I'd had another couple of seconds, I could have got the lasso that essentially my rope was in around its neck and had it completely under control.
Okay. It sends a bot coming.
Problem is it spotted me.
Oh no.
It worked out what was happening.
Yeah.
And basically charged at me.
Sounds bad.
Yes, it was not ideal, shall we say, because it actually hit me.
Oh.
Luckily, like I say, I was a pretty decent investigator, so I was pretty sure I knew what we were handling. And what I had specifically done was I had put on... We've got these very, very kind of transparent gloves.
Yeah.
You know, for when we have to handle some more dangerous creatures, but we still need to keep an eye on, say, like skin conditions or skin issues within our hands, so we'd be able to see what's going on directly.
Yeah.
And I was wearing these because the adhesive sticks to the surface.
And then you just slip out of the glove and you were fine.
Yep, I managed to stop it from...
Yeah. Good thinking.
Getting like my face attached to it or anything. But, you know, that was a bit of contortionism, I have to admit. But I managed to slip out. I was wearing a spare shirt on top of mine, so that came off quickly.
So
luckily,
we're basically doing a striptease for a Kelpie.
I mean, not voluntarily.
That makes it worse.
But I was able to, you know, get rid of the stuff that was stuck to the Kelpie. It wasn't sure what the hell was going on. And I managed to use that time of confusion to quickly get the rope around its neck, hold it in place for a couple of seconds for it to become a little bit more docile, harnessed it up, and took it back to the trailer and take it to one of our more controlled areas where there's a couple of Kelpies. They tend to be a little bit more isolated, but again, we can't, you know, give each one its own river or lake for us to then, you know, be watchful of it.
Yeah.
There's just not enough. We don't have enough manpower for that. So they do have to live a little bit closer together in kind of a watery environment that we provide them in on private ground owned by us, where we can contain them and we can feed them.
Yeah.
And, you know, keep them happy and out of the way.
So talking about it, what do you feed them? If they usually hunt humans, I assume you don't feed them those. But what do they accept?
A quick run off to the local mortuary. Yeah. No, we're not quite that bad. No, again, we just feed them, you know, general kind of meats and things like that. They're not actually that picky. Exactly why they decided that the only thing they're going to hunt out in the wild is humans, I don't know.
Maybe humans are the most gullible.
Yeah, well, we can't really communicate with them in that way and find out exactly why, but either way, we keep them out of the way.
You could try to make them sing a song about it.
Well, I think I'm supposed to be going. I think I'm supposed to be going over to the facility in a couple of weeks' time. Who knows? I might see if the research team will lend me a recorder. I'm sure I can play hot cross buns at them.
Oh, I'm excited to hear that.
You won't be. But yeah,
Well,
that's kind of the Kelpie. A really interesting creature. Really, really dangerous creature. But very, very beautiful to see. And ugly when they die.
yeah. Yeah, very interesting, but not half as interesting as the fact that there are no white horses, which I'm still thinking about.
That is a brain teaser that we're going to leave you with until next time, I think.
Yeah. And of course, as always, if you're listening to this podcast, do the social thing. You know how it works on the internet. Give us a rating if you'd like. Subscribe so you don't miss anything. Keep an eye out for our Halloween special. We have an interesting episode there for you.
Very.
And yeah. Do you have any last words?
Just don't forget, we also have a Discord now for you to join. The link will be in the description. And
if I remember.
Yeah, if you remember. And we're looking for reviews and obviously ratings and everything like that to help the algorithm gods really get us into your feeds. And more importantly, on the Discord, you can ask us about the various creatures that we've talked about, but you can also suggest ones that we might be able to tell you about, depending if they're actually real or not.
Yeah, which most of them are, if we're honest. So if there's anything you're curious about, shoot us a line.
Yeah.
And we'll sort it out in one of the next episodes if we can.
Yeah, just don't ask about squirrels. No one's ready for squirrels.
Oh no, don't remind me.
Masters of the universe, really, they are.
They are. Yeah, the Norse were onto something.
Mm.
Anyway, I guess that's it for today.
Yeah, well, before we go, what is our next episode? It says a you-led one next, so what are you talking about?
Oh yeah, we are talking about another very local one to Germany. As I've mentioned before, I am from Germany, so I obviously dealt with a lot of the creatures that are home here, and there's one that's entirely localized to Aachen as far as we know, and that's the Barkauf. That's going to be an interesting one for today. There's going to be lots of drinking involved.
Ooh, sounds good to me.
As long as you're not the one who has to do it.
Fair enough.
But more on that next time.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for listening, and we will see you next time.
Yeah. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.